Good morning. So today we're going to talk about the nuances of pulling the dash and the evaporator in a W126. And I specifically picked a second generation car because it can be a little bit more complicated. So here we are. The first thing that I want to talk about with the 126 dash removal is the center pod. Now, once you get this center piece off with the climate control in it, this would be one of the first things you're going to focus on. But let's talk about all this stuff in the middle right here. Step one, you're going to pull the ashtray out. Below the ashtray are two screws, which most people know about. Then when you get to the radio, if you're pulling out a stock Mercedes radio, remember that there are two metal tabs on the bottom of the radio that have to be depressed about 5 to 6 millimeters so that the radio can be pulled out forward. Once the radio is removed and disconnected, then below this shelf, are two black metal screws that hold this thing in from the bottom, and then the entire climate control panel will swing outward. Once you have that out, then you can go ahead and pull the bottom tray right here, which just lifts out, and you can remove this ring and pull the wood panel out, and then you're going to undo the two screws back here. Now, to remove this console box, if you have a console box, two screws in the front of the console box will allow you to lift it out, and then one screw back in the middle, buried deep in a hole, will allow this whole thing to come loose. The reason that you have to loosen up this entire console to get this out is because you don't want to break it. And once you get this panel out and all those other screws removed, there's going to be a screw here and a screw here that holds the console in. And once you are able to move the console from side to side, you can access two upward-facing Phillips head screws, fine thread, that hold this guy into the dash. And that will allow you to partially remove it. Now, there are two more screws up in here, up in the top, and to do that you have to take out the vents, which you have to push in. These vents actually push in so that you can easily access the boot and the adjuster and everything. And you'll have to remove the two upward facing screws that hold this pod into the dash. And then there's a little adjuster in the middle. And that will allow you to take this pod and push it into the dash. That's what you're doing. You're not removing a single cable or anything. You're just pushing it into the dash. Now, some people see the fiber optic cables for this thing that light up these three rows, and they think to themselves, there's got to be I've got to disconnect each one of these from the pod. And actually, they form a single fiber optic pigtail that plugs into the bulb in the very back here. You just remove that fiber optic pigtail and leave it alone. And this whole thing stays. This thing stays with the heater box. Now, the next thing that you're going to have to do when you're pulling the dash on a 126, let's see here. What was the other complicated part? All right. So when you're getting the console out, there's going to be a slider and a cable that go underneath this thing and up to the front of the heater box, where there's like a little pivot that opens and closes the vent for the rear air supply. And this little white fork has to be separated gently on each end. You don't want to break it, but you want to separate it, pull it apart, and undo the little chain, and take a photo so that you know where the cable is routed. So that's very important. And then after that, you should be able to lift the entire console out backwards first, sort of like you're opening up the trunk of a car. Now, let's go to another complicated area, and that's the airbag frame. Now, not all cars have the airbag frame, but it is kind of a complicated thing. We're going to talk about removing the lower dash panel first. So if you have a special car, if you have a US car that has the little package tray under here and you've got the little covers, you don't want to break those little covers because they're unobtainium. They have a hook on one side, and then they have a little grabber on the other. You don't want to pull against the hooked end because you will break it. So what you want to do is you want to get in there with a dental pick, and I think on this one it's the inside part. You want to gently grab it and pull it out. And then on this side you want to take a little dental pick and gently grab it and pull it out. I'm sorry that this car doesn't have it, but you want to gently grab it and tug it out just a little bit so that it releases. Again, you don't want to break those things. And then on the passenger side, it's going to be kind of the same thing. Gently tug and pull. Now, once you have that thing dropped and you can access the airbag support frame, you have 1, 2, 3 13mm screws in the bottom, 2 13mm screws in the top, and you have a bunch of Mercedes loom ties to undo, which you don't want to cut. You don't need to remove the whole airbag frame when you're pulling the evaporator case or the dash. You just need to loosen it and set it aside so that it's not attached to the steering column anymore. And actually it doesn't even attach to the evaporator case. So, just removing it and setting it aside makes it a little bit easier. Now on this side, our biggest problem is going to be the cover right here for the ECU compartment. That thing has to slide out backwards, meaning that your best bet may actually be to pull up this plastic sill and slide it backwards so that you don't break the little attachment points for the ECU cover. That would be a real shame, especially if you're dealing with an extremely low mileage car with a really nice interior. I see so many of these where these things are needlessly broken. Once you're done there, you can remove the 2 funny mounting screws in the left and right inside of the dash. You can remove the airbag, which is one singular bolt that goes up. If you have a passenger airbag car, there's one 10mm bolt that goes upwards through the dash. And when you're dealing with the impact bolster, which is not on this car, thankfully, there's a 10mm nut just to the left of the steering column that's 10mm bolt accessible through a little tiny hole in the base of the steering column where you can stick a very long 10mm socket and an extension, and you can undo it about halfway, and then the thing will drop down with some struggling. Now, once you're done there, and you remove the steering wheel, and you've got this thing gently pushed through the dash, you essentially are in a really great position to pull the dashboard. You have to slide these A-pillar covers backwards. There's going to be a bolt under there. There's going to be a bolt under there. There's going to be a bolt in the middle. With these bolts, they mount on a rotating stand, and that rotating stand cannot be adjusted up or down. You should not do that or it'll mess with your dashboard height. So what I recommend to people who are pulling their dashboard, I say don't alter the position of the rotating stand. So once you get that thing out, then with the evaporator case, this is where things become kind of interesting. With the evap case, you have to disconnect. There's only one vacuum line you have to disconnect, and that's the one that feeds the vacuum solenoid valve grid from the engine. But any electrical parts that attach to the evaporator case have to be removed. So you have to unclip the center bulb holder. You have to unclip and unplug and sometimes unscrew some of the electrical connections that go around the airbag cage frame. And then you have to take the harness and you have to drape it. The main harness, you don't want to start pulling harnesses here. You actually just want to drape it over the top of the evap case, and that's the easiest way to get to it. Anyway, I made this video for one of my subscribers who's going to be doing this job, and I strongly recommend being very careful with everything when you're pulling the dash from one of these cars, especially if you have burl walnut veneer. And for the record, the car is going to be pulling the dash on is a 560 SEL 1990. So hope this is useful. Have a great day and happy Thanksgiving.